Ryomen Sukuna, the main villain of Jujutsu Kaisen, known as the King of Curses, undefeated for over 1,000 years since the Heian era. A brutal, impossibly arrogant villain who only ever cared about one thing, power. But here's a fun thought. What if he wasn't the main villain at all? What if someone else took his place? What would actually change if Sukuna got swapped out for someone like Jogo, who can't keep his temper in check, Mahito, who's dangerously cunning, or Geto, who plays the long game with terrifying precision? To make this work, let's set one ground rule. Sukuna simply never existed in these scenarios. Each character steps in as the story's central villain, fully themselves. No imitation, no compromise. Alright, let's kick things off with the first one, Jogo. Jogo is a curse with a serious chip on his shoulder. In his eyes, curses are the real humans, because actual humans are hypocrites, masking their true nature behind forced smiles and hollow positivity. Curses, on the other hand, are born from raw, negative emotion. To Jogo, that's honesty, that's purity. Humans are the fraud, curses are the truth. He's hot-headed, easily provoked, and has an ego the size of a volcano, which, fittingly, is kind of his whole thing. But in this scenario, Jogo isn't just a special grade curse, he's the king of curses. And unlike Sukuna, who is purely driven by his own amusement, Jogo has an actual agenda. He wants curses to inherit the earth. Every last human, gone, burned away. He's not chaotic for the sake of it, he's on a mission. His power gets a serious upgrade here too. Scaled to the equivalent of 20 of Sukuna's fingers, his domain expansion, Coffin of the Iron Mountain, is no longer just a magma trap. It becomes a full-blown tectonic hell. Unleashed without a barrier, it could liquefy an area in minutes. Just like in canon, Yuji's school gets attacked by a curse. To save his friends, Yuji swallows what he thinks is a cursed object, but it's Jogo's essence, sealed away. Here's where things diverge. Jogo has zero interest in hijacking Yuji's body for fun. He's not Sukuna. The idea of living inside a human vessel is, to him, a humiliation. But he's pragmatic enough to tolerate it, because he needs Yuji's life energy as fuel while he works towards something bigger. Yuji becomes an incubator, a temporary inconvenience with a heartbeat. The dynamic between Jogo and Yuji locked inside the same soul is genuinely fascinating. Where Sukuna mostly just insulted Yuji and treated him like furniture, Jogo actually argues with him, constantly. It's a full-on ideological war playing out in one body. Yuji wants to save people. Jogo finds that laughable. Not just naive, but actively counterproductive. Every person Yuji saves today is someone who'll damage the world tomorrow. Someone whose suffering will eventually birth another curse, just like Jogo himself. You keep saving them, Jogo would say, and they keep creating us. Tell me, who's really the problem here? It's the kind of argument Yuji can't easily dismiss, and that's what makes it sting. Jogo sees Gojo as the single greatest obstacle standing between curses and their future. Enemy number one. Their first encounter follows a similar beat to canon. Jogo gets thoroughly outclassed, and Gojo makes it look almost embarrassing. But this time, it's a close embarrassing. With his amplified fire output, Jogo pushes back hard enough that Gojo only edges out the win through unlimited void. And even then, Jogo doesn't go quietly. He torches an entire city block on his way out just to buy himself an escape window. He doesn't forget it. He doesn't forgive it. Every encounter after that carries the weight of that humiliation. Then comes Shibuya. With Gojo finally sealed, Jogo tears himself free from Yuji completely, and he is done holding back. He doesn't sneak around. He doesn't pick targets strategically. He opens with Meteor and turns Shibuya Station and everything around it into a sea of lava. Nanami, Naobito, and Maki don't get blindsided by a cheap shot this time. They actually face him head on, and they still lose. Not because he catches them off guard, but because the sheer, suffocating heat of his presence is something none of them can endure for long. The final battle comes in Shinjuku, and by this point, Jogo has evolved into something the sorcerers can barely put a name to. They're calling him the Volcanic God. It fits. Yuji, now without Jogo's presence inside him, goes in swinging, combining the residual cursed fire techniques left behind in his body with his own refined use of Black Flash. It's messy and desperate, and exactly the kind of fight Yuji always ends up in. But Jogo isn't fighting for glory here. He's fighting for Hanami and Dagon, who fell before him, and for the world as he believed it should be. At one point, he turns to the sorcerers still standing and shouts, "You fight for humans who will die and be forgotten. We fight for the earth, which is eternal." It's unhinged. It's also, in its own twisted way, completely sincere. In the end, Jogo falls. Worn down by Yuji, Yuta, and what's left of the Sorcerer Corps, he finally hits his limit. But he goes out the way he lived, with his head held high and a small, quiet explosion. He smiles. There's a last, soft pop of flame, and then we're only resting. As long as humans carry fear within them, we will always come back. Alright, we're done with Jogo. Now let's move on to our next cursed candidate. The theory behind this character is a complete plot twist, and trust me, it's going to blow your mind. Let's get into it. Disaster curse, Dagon. Behind that deceptively cute, almost shy exterior, Dagon is hiding a monstrous appetite and a genuinely terrifying level of cruelty. That said, when it comes to the curse hierarchy at the start of the story, the power balance wouldn't shift all that dramatically. After all, in the original timeline, Dagon can shift into his humanoid form when pushed to the brink, which means the early episode curse lineup would still hold steady. What makes him fascinating, though, is the moment he crosses paths with the most powerful sorcerers of his era. While his companions relied on elaborate rituals or complex hand seals to survive, Dagon pulled off something far simpler and far more unsettling. His innate technique lets him drag hundreds of people into his dimension in the blink of an eye, no preparation required. The moment sorcerers charged at him, he could activate his domain on the spot and swallow them whole. Even anti-domain users with top-tier skills couldn't do much when Dagon could fall back on his water-based abilities to slip away clean. Fast forward to the Shibuya incident, where Dagon sets his sights on the Tandon to trigger a global evolution event. In this timeline, he becomes practically untouchable. His water manipulation works both as an impenetrable shield and an instant escape route, letting him shrug off attacks and close in on targets with ease. All it takes is summoning an endless swarm of giant fish Shikigami, and he can devour every last Tandon at once. And just like that, boom! The world is on the brink of apocalypse, overwhelmed by a catastrophic surge of cursed energy. Disaster curse, Mahito. Unlike Jogo, Mahito has absolutely zero interest in cursed race pride or dignity. To him, humans are just clay, shapeless material to be broken apart and remolded however he pleases. His status as the king of curses would supercharge his abilities to an almost unfair degree, and his soul manipulation technique is already operating on a godlike level. Even going up against Gojo Satoru, Mahito would have a real shot at surviving, thanks to his instant transfiguration and reflex speed that borders on precognitive. Sure, Gojo is faster in every conventional sense, but Mahito's trick of splintering his soul into thousands of fragments gives him a genuinely unpredictable counter against even the strongest opponent. Here's where things get interesting. The dynamic between Mahito and Jogo is a clash of opposites, and that's exactly where everything falls apart for the Curse faction. Jogo loses it when Mahito recklessly transfigures human souls just to run casual experiments on transfigured humans. Experiments he treats like a hobby. Instead of backing off, Mahito deliberately pokes at Jogo's temper, baiting him into snapping. And right on cue, Jogo launches an all-out blind assault. This is the moment Mahito's true madness surfaces. Drawing on his virtually limitless cursed energy reserves, Mahito punches straight through Jogo's defenses, seizes his soul with absolute control, and converts him into a personal energy battery. The Curse faction implodes from the inside, dismantled by their own leader. As for his alliance with Geto, or rather, Kenjaku, it would be nothing short of a toxic minefield. Kenjaku keeps a nervous eye on Mahito's movements, but he can't cut ties because Mahito holds irreplaceable knowledge about the human soul. So the alliance survives, even as both sides quietly wait for the perfect moment to stab the other in the back. By the final arc, Mahito becomes the single most terrifying threat to every Jujutsu sorcerer alive. The reason is simple. Idle transfiguration can now be triggered remotely. He weaponizes sound waves or his own cursed energy output to attack souls from a distance. The chain reaction is devastating. Any enemy who steps into range without a rock-solid soul barrier will melt and transform into a monster before they even realize what hit them. Special grade cursed womb, Choso. If Choso claimed the throne as king of curses, driven by his death-painting lineage asserting dominance from the very beginning, the immediate ripple effect would fall squarely on his younger brothers. Iso and Kechizu would receive an automatic and completely unhinged power boost. Fueled by a direct line of blood from Choso, their growth would accelerate at a frightening pace day after day. These two wouldn't just be background characters anymore. They'd transform into a special grade duo that nobody in their right mind would want to fight. With the king title in his hands, Choso's blood manipulation would reach a level that goes well beyond scary. His blood sorcery would become far more versatile, laced with a corrosive poison that has no known antidote. On top of that, he can reconstruct his physical body almost instantly using scattered traces of his own blood, a regeneration process far more efficient than even Sukuna's. Take it further, and his blood can be shaped into a city-scale defensive wall or a storm of razor-sharp projectiles. The most absurd part? He can replenish lost blood in real time using raw cursed energy. In short, Choso as King of Curses is essentially running on an infinite fuel tank. That said, in the world of Jujutsu, the absolute ceiling still belongs to one person. The moment Choso faces Gojo Satoru, every divine blood technique in his arsenal hits a wall. His blood sorcery slams headfirst into infinity, and it bounces right off without leaving a scratch. Where other characters might look for a clever way out, Choso operates on a completely different wavelength. His nature as the eldest brother means retreat is simply not an option as long as Iso and Kechizu are still in danger. He would fight to the last drop rather than leave them exposed. And even if he tried to pull back, Gojo can close the gap in seconds. There's nowhere to run. The outcome of this duel is honestly not hard to predict. The moment Gojo locks in for Hollow Purple, Choso's story ends right there. One strike and he's erased, along with any scenario where the sorcery world faces a full-scale apocalypse. Renegade Jujutsu Sorcerer, Suguru Geto. Alright, let's shift gears and imagine a completely different scenario. Picture this. The role of Cursed King isn't filled by a cursed spirit, but by Suguru Geto himself. The original, unmodified version, completely free of Kenjaku's interference. In this scenario, Geto has tapped into what we'll call Point Zero, the deepest root of cursed energy that flows directly from the human side of existence. Once in power, he would waste no time enforcing a brutal caste system. Those with ability rule, while the ordinary humans he dismisses as monkeys are either wiped out entirely or kept alive purely as cursed energy batteries. Jogo and Mahito might try to resist out of sheer pride, and they'd immediately regret it. They'd be forgetting just how monstrous Geto's cursed spirit manipulation has become at this level. Taking them on would be trivially easy for him. He'd beat them into submission, compress them into balls of raw energy, and absorb them without a second thought. Rather than becoming rulers of the earth, Jogo and Mahito would end up as subservient pawns with no way out. And would Geto stop there? Absolutely not. Even in the original story, his innate technique allowed him to command thousands of curses simultaneously. With an overflowing energy reservoir at this scale, Geto could compress millions of cursed soldiers into a single, massive Uzumaki blast. The destructive compression from that alone would be enough to carve through entire land masses without breaking a sweat. It's no surprise that in the modern era, Geto's ambitions would ignite the bloodiest civil war the sorcery world has ever seen. As the social fabric begins to collapse, Jujutsu sorcerers would face an impossible choice. Swear loyalty to the new king's extremist doctrine, or be consumed entirely by an army of millions of cursed spirits. Ancient sorcerer, Kenjaku. If the puppet master behind everything ascended to become the true cursed king, his already devious body-switching technique would multiply in terrifying ways. The ability he spent 1,000 years honing, collecting cursed techniques from every host he's ever hijacked, cannot be understated. Once he reaches the top, the technique becomes something else entirely. Kenjaku could simultaneously wield multiple high-level abilities from different hosts, with zero mental strain, zero overload, no limits whatsoever. In the past, every time he faced a dangerous sorcerer, Kenjaku wriggled out through sheer cunning, faking his own death or body swapping in an instant. But even those enemies with sharp detection instincts would find him nearly impossible to pin down, because the king-level power boost lets him construct the most intricate and impenetrable barrier techniques the world has ever seen. That becomes his defining edge, whether he needs a clean escape or a trap that leaves his enemies completely helpless. In terms of the early plot, not much would change on the surface, except for one crucial difference. Kenjaku would no longer need to operate from the shadows. He'd openly and confidently trigger the culling game at a scale far more massive and precisely orchestrated than anything seen in the original. The real chaos kicks in during the Shibuya and Shinjuku arcs. Jujutsu sorcerers would find themselves hitting a wall at every turn, because no matter how relentlessly they attack, Kenjaku always has another layer of barrier tactics and cursed technique combinations ready to go, an endless supply. Their only realistic shot at breaking through would be Yuta Okotsu with his copy technique, or Maki Zenin with the Soul Splitter katana. But Kenjaku's near-perfect barrier protection makes him virtually untouchable, and he can vanish beneath it whenever he chooses. The sorcerers end up perpetually one step behind. The evolution game runs exactly as planned. Kenjaku walks away as the undisputed winner, and the merger of all humanity with Tengen becomes reality, giving birth to a new entity that serves as the death knell for human civilization. New Womb Curse. Naoya Zenin. Who would have thought the most insufferable man in the Zenin clan would get a stage this big? Here's the premise. Naoya, who transformed into a special grade curse after his death, seized the throne of cursed energy from deep in the past, driven by buried resentment and a refusal to accept his own failure. The moment he's crowned cursed king, his projection sorcery rockets to a level that breaks all conventional logic. The ability that divides a single second into 24 frames now operates on a dramatically wider scale. Sharper, faster, faster, and more devastating than ever before. Speed isn't his only upgrade either. His physical durability reaches something close to mythical. Naoya's cursed body would harden to the density of legendary steel, making most physical strikes and imprecise slashes bounce right off him without leaving so much as a scratch. Naoya is officially the fastest curse in the entire history of the Jujutsu world. This godlike speed is what keeps him alive through repeated clashes with the most formidable sorcerers of the past. Even opponents who control teleportation or spatial manipulation wouldn't stand a chance, because no matter how fast any sorcerer tries to move, Naoya, operating the 24 frames law at King of Curses scale, is already several steps ahead, moving at a speed that's genuinely invisible to the naked eye. In the modern era, his first order of business is revenge. No pleasantries, no delays. He'd flatten the Zenin clan to its foundations and tear apart the conventional power structure of the Jujutsu world that he always despised for refusing to acknowledge his pure talent. The final arc is where he truly becomes unstoppable. Not only does Naoya break out of every domain expansion with ease, but he can also build up enough velocity to hit with the destructive force of a falling meteor. Every time he drives his body into an enemy's position, he'd scan an entire battlefield in milliseconds, locate Tengen, and execute his own vision of evolution. All of it, just to show the entire world that he alone is the greatest being to ever exist. That is the true definition of an untouchable cursed king. The Slayer without cursed energy, Toji Fushiguro. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for. What if the king of all curses and sorcerers was someone with absolutely zero cursed energy to begin with? That's right, none other than Toji Fushiguro, carrying the full weight of his heavenly restriction. Just how catastrophically would the Jujutsu world come apart? Here's the key assumption that makes this scenario as wild as it deserves to be. Toji's physical absence of cursed energy exists at such an extreme level that his very presence acts like a walking black hole, capable of absorbing or outright nullifying the laws of cursed energy in the surrounding area. The moment he's recognized as the ultimate global threat, his physical capabilities spike so far beyond human comprehension that it stops making sense to measure them. Add to that his mastery of top-tier cursed tools like the inverted spear of heaven and playful cloud, backed by predatory instincts that have been sharpened to absolute perfection. After years of honing his body to a genuinely divine level, the epic moment arrives. Toji and Gojo Satoru stand face to face in a battle with everything on the line. But in this timeline, Toji has no intention of running or falling back on guerrilla tactics like he did in the original. He walks straight in, head on. When these two monsters clash, the gap between them is razor thin. Why? Because Toji's mere existence destabilizes the cursed energy in the surrounding area, causing Gojo's prized infinity to distort and fracture all over the place. Their fight is the purest possible collision between raw physical supremacy and absolute sorcery. Through a duel of almost unbearable intensity, Toji finally punches through Gojo's last line of defense, finds the fatal opening, and permanently cuts off the flow of cursed energy through the greatest sorcerer alive. Now, plenty of you might argue that a Six Eyes user should win no matter what, and that's a completely valid take. But under the crushing physical pressure of a Toji operating at king level, honestly, the outcome is up for debate. So, what do you think? Would Gojo Satoru hold the line? Or would Toji Fushiguro, the king without cursed energy, walk away victorious from this insane scenario? Drop your argument in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another wild Jujutsu Kaisen theory. And right over here, I've already queued up the next video you absolutely need to watch. Hit it now!